Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we dig through the information stacks to pull out what really matters for you.
And today, we've got a really interesting research paper on the table. It's called Retrieval-Augmented Generation with Conflicting Evidence. You can find it over on arxiv.org.
ArcCV, yeah, the preprint server. So RAG, retrieval-augmented generation, that's the tech behind a lot of AI search tools, right?
Yeah.
They go out, grab info, and then generate an answer.
Exactly. But the core problem this paper tackles is what happens when the information the AI finds isn't reliable? You know, when it's conflicting or misleading or sometimes just plain wrong.
Which, let's be honest, happens a lot online. The internet's a real mixed bag.
It really is. And this paper highlights a specific challenge. Current AI systems often stumble when they have to deal with both ambiguity like legitimate multiple answers and bad information like misinformation all at the same time.
Okay, so it's not just finding an answer, it's figuring out if there are multiple correct answers while also trying to spot the fake stuff.
Yeah.
That does sound tricky.
It is. And that's where the paper's main contributions come in. First, they created something called RAMDocs. It's a new data set.
A data set, like a collection of test questions for the AI.
Precisely. But RAMDocs is specifically designed to mimic this messy reality we just talked about. It deliberately includes ambiguous questions, documents with outright misinformation, and, just irrelevant noise, all mixed together.
Ah, okay. Because previous data sets maybe only focused on one problem at a time, like just ambiguity or just misinformation.
Exactly right. They often tackle these issues in isolation. RAMDocs forces the AI to handle everything simultaneously, which is much closer to what happens in the real world.
And how did the AIs do on it?
Well, that's the interesting part. Even the best existing models really struggle. The paper mentions they only achieved about a 32% exact match score.
Wow, okay, so RAMDocs really is a tough benchmark. It shows there's a real gap here.
Definitely. Which leads to their second big contribution, a proposed solution called Madam RAG.
Madam RAG. Catchy name. What does it stand for?
It's a multi-agent debate for ambiguity and misinformation in RAG.
Multi-agent debate. Okay, that sounds intriguing. Not just one AI, but several.
Yeah, that's the core idea. Instead of one big AI model trying to sift through all the retrieved documents at once, Madam RAG assigns each document to its own smaller, independent AI agent.
Okay, so each document gets its own little advocate, almost.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Each agent looks only at its assigned document and comes up with an initial answer based just on that.
And then do they just average the answers?
No, this is where the debate part comes in. The agents share their initial answers. Then there's a central component, they call it an aggregator.
Right.
The aggregator looks at all these initial answers, synthesizes them, points out where they disagree, and provides a kind of summary.
Okay.
Then, crucially, they go through more rounds. The agents can actually revise their answers based on what the aggregator said and what the other agents found.
So it's an iterative process, like a structured discussion.
Exactly. And this debate process helps uncover issues. For instance, if two agents have different but correct answers, the debate might reveal they're talking about different things.
Like the Michael Jordan example the paper uses, that's a classic ambiguity problem.
Perfect example. You ask, when was Michael Jordan born? One source says 1963, that's the basketball player, Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Right.
Another source might say 1956, that's Michael I. Jordan, the scientist. Both are factually correct.
But they refer to different people. Ambiguity.
Precisely. Then maybe a third document says some Michael Jordan was born in 1998. That's just wrong, misinformation.
Yeah.
And maybe a fourth document just talks about his basketball stats in the 90s. That's noise, irrelevant to the birth year question.
So in the Madam RAG debate, the agents with 1963 and 1956 could present their evidence, while the agent with 1998 might struggle to defend its claim if challenged, and the stats agent's info would be seen as off-topic.
You got it. The aggregator's job is then to synthesize this. Maybe saying something like, we found evidence for two individuals, Michael Jordan, basketball, born 1963, and Michael Jordan, scientist, born 1956, while filtering out the 1998 and the irrelevant stats.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So did it work? How did Madam RAG perform compared to other methods?
The results were pretty strong, actually. They tested it on older data sets too, ambigdocs, which focuses on ambiguity, and faith evil, which is more about misinformation.
Right.
And Madam RAG showed, well, significant improvements over the baseline methods, especially when using powerful language models like Llama or Quen. We're taking accuracy boosts of like over 11% on ambigdocs and nearly 16% on faith evil in some cases.
Those are pretty big jumps in performance.
They really are. It also did better than just feeding all the documents concatenated together into one big prompt, which is kind of the standard RAG approach.
So the debate structure itself seems to add value.
It seems so. And on RAMDocs, they're a really tough data set.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, all methods found RAMDocs challenging. But Madam Rag still consistently performed better than the others. It didn't ace it by any means.
Okay.
But it showed a clear advantage, suggesting this multi-agent debate approach has real potential for these complex, messy scenarios.
This is fascinating from a tech perspective, but let's pivot a bit. How might this actually be useful in the real world? The paper mentions banking and legal industries.
Yeah, and those are prime examples where dealing with conflicting, messy information is just part of the daily grind, and accuracy is absolutely critical.
Okay, let's take banking first. Where would this fit in?
Think about something like customer due diligence, KYC, know your customer, or AML, anti-money laundering checks.
Right, banks have to do a lot of that, verifying identities, checking risks.
Exactly. And they pull information from all over internal records, news feeds, government filings, public databases. It's a real mix. You can easily find outdated info, conflicting reports about the same person, or, crucially, information about different people with the same name.
Ah, the ambiguity problem again. Like the Michael Jordan example, but with potentially serious financial consequences.
Precisely. Madam Rag's ability to handle that ambiguity, to help distinguish between, say, John Smith, a reliable business owner, and John Smith, the person on a sanctions list, could be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to mix those two up.
And then there's the misinformation aspect. Detecting potentially fraudulent information or identifying unreliable news sources during risk assessment, that's huge for banks.
Makes sense. And the RANDocs design, with varying levels of support for different facts.
That mirrors reality too, doesn't it? Sometimes a critical piece of information might only appear in one or two highly credible sources mixed in with a lot of noise. A system needs to be able to weigh that evidence appropriately.
Okay, so for banking, better accuracy in KYC/ML, handling ambiguity with names, spotting misinformation for risk. Got it. What about the legal field?
Legal research is another area just swimming in text data. Lawyers sift through mountains of case law, statutes, regulations, legal commentary.
Yeah, huge amounts of information.
And it's complex. Legal terms can have multiple meanings depending on context. That's ambiguity again. Cases might have similar names but wildly different outcomes. Precedents get overturned, creating essentially outdated or misleading information if you're not careful.
So finding the right precedent, understanding the nuances, avoiding reliance on overturned cases, that's core to building a legal argument.
Absolutely. Madam Rag's potential here is in improving the accuracy and reliability of legal research, helping lawyers differentiate between multiple valid interpretations of a statute, for example, while simultaneously filtering out irrelevant or superseded case law.
And the debate aspect, does that resonate in a legal context?
I think it does, actually. You could almost see it as analogous to how legal arguments are formed. Different parties or different lawyers might look at the same body of evidence, the same cases, the same statutes, and argue for different interpretations.
Interesting parallel.
The Madam Rag aggregator, in this analogy, is maybe like the judge or perhaps a senior lawyer trying to synthesize all these viewpoints and the supporting evidence to get the most comprehensive and accurate understanding of the legal position.
So it's moving beyond just finding documents to actually helping evaluate the information within them in a more structured way.
That's the goal, I think. It's about creating AI tools that can better grapple with the inherent complexity and, yes, the conflicts within large bodies of information.
Okay, so let's sort of wrap up the key takeaways from this deep dive. We've seen that dealing with conflicting information, ambiguity, misinformation, noise, all at once is a major hurdle for current AI systems.
Right, and the researchers tackled this head-on by creating RAMDocs, a much more realistic, challenging data set.
And proposing Madam Rag, this novel multi-agent debate system, as a way to improve how AI handles these conflicts.
And while it shows real promise, especially in outperforming existing methods, the results on RAMDocs also tell us there's still a way to go.
Yeah.
It's a hard problem.
Definitely. But the potential applications, particularly in fields like banking and law, where information integrity is paramount, seem pretty significant. It feels like a step towards more trustworthy AI analysis.
I agree. It's pushing beyond simple retrieval towards something more like critical evaluation, which is exciting.
So for everyone listening, maybe take a moment to think about your own field. How often do you run into conflicting information or ambiguous situations? Imagine having a tool that could reliably help navigate that. How useful would that be?
And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, the paper itself is on ArcSigIr, The PDF is 2504.13079. They've also shared their code and the Ramdocs data, which is great for transparency and further research.
Definitely check it out if you're interested. And finally, here's something to chew on. As these AI systems get better and better at resolving conflicts, at sorting truth from falsehood, at navigating ambiguity, how does that change our relationship with information? How does it shape our trust? And what new challenges might pop up when AI becomes not just an information retriever, but potentially a sophisticated arbiter of conflicting evidence?
That's a really important question for the future.
It is indeed. Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Jump Dive.